Hey folks, how you doing today? Mm-hmm. Subscribe. 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 Uh, I have lots of things to talk about. But today I thought I'd talk about a term I use from time to time. It's Western thought. And I thought I should clarify exactly what I mean by Western thought. Okay? And when the term Western thought is used, sometimes folks might think, well, uh, it pertains only to Europeans and the Americans, you know, who are looked upon as Western society. But when I talk about Western thought, I'm talking about people anywhere in the world who engage in a certain type of thinking. A certain type of thinking that is not European in origin, you know, and a certain type of thinking that is all over the world, really. Not everybody engages in it, but Eastern countries do, such as China, India, etc., the Asian countries, and Africans. They too engage in Western thought, because this Western thought that I'm referring to is simply a type of thinking, you know, and here it is. It is a type of thinking where intelligence comes first. Logic, reasoning, okay, comes first. And with this type of situation where you're putting in intelligence first, in other words, intelligence is not based on knowledge. Knowledge should always come first. In other words, know what you're going to reason about. If you don't, you go way off course, and that's what happens. So in today's society, people have made great strides in technology and industry and manufacturing and all that stuff. The economy is busting the seams, everything. You know what I mean? The stock market's booming. You know what I mean? But this is the result of putting intelligence first. If the people were putting knowledge first, they wouldn't be going so fast. They wouldn't be going so far in such a short period of time. You see. But they are going very, very far. This calls for what in nature, or scientists use it all the time, it is called regression toward the mean, where the mean is an average, you see. So when people go so far, like is happening with the present generation, nature calls for a correction. That is, a going back to where society should have been had they not made the great leap forward. That's called regression toward the mean. It's a natural law. It happens quite often. Now, let's take an example that I guess we all have heard of, most people, when it comes to the stock market, okay? Now, when the stock market is booming, 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 it goes way up there, like it is today, okay? But now, then sometimes comes along as a recession. And so the experts in the field says, well, this is a correction. The correction is that the stock market then starts receding, going back to where it would have been had they not made that giant leap forward in the start, or either in society or in technology, etc. You see. So we make this correction. It is going back. It is regression toward the mean, the average, where we should have been had we not made the great leap forward in the stock markets or in technology or anything else, in society in general, you know. So with all the technology and everything, all the manufacturing and industrials taking off and all that stuff, we have polluted the world. The world's crying out for help, you see. But people are driven by their passion. They're driven really to make money. And this passion drives the intelligence factor. That's greed. And so greed lands us where we are today. And so the earth is crying for help. The earth is going to make a correction. Now the humans, they're talking about it. They're talking about setting goals for pollution or what's that, the greenhouse effect thing, carbon emissions, trying to slow things down. In other words, something is telling them to make a correct. Well, yeah, because the earth is dying. Make a correction. But it seems like they really can't. They talk about it, but they're not really doing it. They got a Band-Aid here, a Band-Aid there. That's not going to do the job. You know what I mean? They really got to step back. They got to make a big correction. That happens in the stock market when they have a depression. That's a huge correction. We don't have to go through that, hopefully. You know what I mean? But they got to make a correction in things. You know what I mean? In other words, they got to go back to the realm of knowledge and say, look, this is how we really got to handle this. You know what I mean? And that calls for going back because knowledge precedes intelligence. This is how it started off with the human species. It was knowledge first, and then intelligence came later. They refer to the coming of intelligence as like in the mythology, they mention the coming of Tum. Okay? So I relate this to the coming of intelligence. Yeah, intelligence is great when used correctly. Okay? So then we have made the great advances, etc., due to Western thinking. All right? And Western thinking it seems to prevail in the world today. And like I say, people all over the world are into Western thinking. Intelligence before knowledge. Okay. So I heard a gentleman talking on the internet one day, African guy, and he said that what the Africans need to do is to return to totemism. Okay? It would be good if everybody in the world did it. It would sort of set things back. If people went back to totemism, they'd be making a correction on their own. They'd be submitting to regression toward the mean and go back to using knowledge first. You see? So we can go back to, for example, our earlier ancestors. Who of course are not with us today, but who is? In the present generation, we have hunters and gatherers. You find them in Africa, you find them in South America, the Brazilian jungle. You probably find some in parts of India today, and maybe even China. They're here. Certain islands down there in the South Atlantic or the Indian Ocean, maybe the South Pacific. They're here, hunters and gatherers. Well, these people put knowledge first. Now, we have some of the hunters and gatherers who Western folks have went to talk to. Ask them why they don't want to come back, or why don't they come back to the city. In other words, come back to Western thinking. But even though they might not have used that term, they didn't. They didn't use such term as Western thinking. They said just come to the city to live. But this is what they're talking about. Western thinking is the underlying factor here. If you come back to the city, you're going to engage in Western thinking because that's what everybody does. Okay? So anyway, these folks said no. They liked their life the way it was. So this tells us that some folks are holding on to knowledge first, you know. And this is a sort of interesting subject, that some of those folks here, the hunters and gatherers, it's a straight line from the ancient ancestors to them. They haven't changed much at all. And that is a sign of longevity. Okay? The value of a society is determined by its longevity. How long it's been around. And that hunting and gathering society has been here for a long time. It puts knowledge before intelligence. Okay, so folks, talk to you and subscribe and have a good day and lovely.